Welcome to Commander Central, episode 81. In a few minutes, we will be joined by a special guest, DJ, from the popular YouTube channel Jumbo Commander, and we're going to be talking about what is all involved in managing an extensive collection of EDH decks, how to keep them updated, keep them playing in their own interesting way, etc. I am Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.
But before then, we're going to talk about how miserably cold it's been here in the Midwest the last 3 days.
I literally have been trying to find pairs of pants without a zipper fly in the fear that something might get stuck.
Well, like when we left the shop on Tuesday night, people were going outside to start their cars in pairs just to because at one point somebody commented whoever it was left, and someone's like, "Are we sure they left? They didn't get outside and trip and fall, and now they're just frozen to death and dead." So we started actually going outside in pairs just for safety to start our cars.
Unfortunately, we live in a big enough metropolis where there's no cows to use as tauntauns like
Right. I would have loved to have seen someone come back in. I had to cut open a cow to stay warm last night. So Max was not at the shop because of the extreme temperatures.
Correct.
Chris was there for a little bit, but you mostly were testing standard, right?
Building 1v1.
Okay. Oh, that's right, because there was a big tournament that weekend.
Yep.
How did that wind up going?
Wonderful.
What deck did you play?
Played mono red Zergo.
Which is
the most fair deck in the format.
Right, which is kind of your fallback, too. That's your baby.
Pretty much.
How'd you wind up doing?
What'd I go?
2-2?
2 and 3, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I missed out of top 8 by losing to a kid named Parker, who's a punk.
He is a punk.
If he's listening to this, I'm coming for you, buddy.
The fact that he played Commander blows my mind.
Yeah.
I played a few games. A couple of things I will mention that popped up. I got just wrecked by a Polymorphous Jest in a game, which is a favorite card of mine, so that'll be one of my MVP cards. And then I saw it in a different game wreck somebody else, too, from the same person. So we cast it in 2 different games, and both times, in my case, I was down to 1 life, but I had Azor the Lawbringer in play, so it came back to me, and I drew Madomi. So I'm like, okay, well, rather than swing with Azor and try to gain 5 life and draw a few cards, let's play Madomi, put Lightning Greaves on Madomi, swing. With Madomi and Azor, I get some chip damage in, and then take my extra turn, and then swing with Azor and gain the life. And then I got jested. And the person who it wasn't even the person I was swinging at. I was swinging at somebody else, and he's like, Polymorphous Jest. And then he chump blocked my Sphinxes that turned into 1/1s. So that was the end of the dream of coming back from 1 life there. And then he did the same thing to somebody else in a different game and dropped Jest on them. So that was, I'm a fan of that card, but I got to see it just house myself and somebody else. So I thought I would quick point that one out. That was about it, though. The shop was kind of quiet. College is not back in session yet, and it was sub-Arctic out, so there was probably 12 to 15 people playing.
Yeah, there wasn't a whole lot of people in.
Yeah. So if you want to find your own copy of Polymorphous Jest and blow apart my Sphinxes at some GP where we encounter one another, where'd you do that, Max?
You can head over to flipsidegaming.com and use promo code CMDR in all caps, and you'll get 10% off your order, $10 or more.
Very nice. And if you want to find us on social media, where'd you do that, Chris?
You can find us on Twitter at CMDR Central. You can find us on Facebook, searching at CMDR Central. Find us on the YouTube, which I was actually watching a lot of YouTube this week for some reason. Stupid funny videos or something.
Yeah, I do that too.
I got dragged into the rabbit hole. It was a bad deal. But you can search at CMDR Central on there, and then you can find us online at CMDRCentral.com.
And, of course, we are on Patreon by searching CMDR Central there, and we have a bunch of new patrons to announce and a few that we missed during our holiday gap that have been brought to our attention.
Yes, indeed.
So first, we apologize for missing them, but our new patrons are John Amoeba, Adam Darby, Blake Carbone, and then the people we missed, and we want to say thank you for supporting, is Richard Snyder, Tom Gilder, Mike Powell, and Adam Zach.
I think you might have pronounced every one of those names correctly. That's a first for us, I think.
I'm done. I can retire.
I am going to also shout a little shout-out thanks here to Patreon supporter Dan Mell, who hooked me up with a foil Sphinx of Insight for my Sphinx deck.
Very nice.
Yeah, so thank you very much to Dan for that. I appreciate it.
The very first thing Dana says to me as he walks in the store, "You got a Sphinx for me?" Yeah, I got a Sphinx for you.
So yeah, that's already been put into my deck along with a couple copies of Smothering Tithe. Chris got me Smothering Tithe too the other night. And I got
I called dibs.
It was my birthday on
It was his birthday, man. What do you expect from me?
That's fair.
And I got a Battle Bond pack from the shop that had a
Foiling double season.
Nope, it was a foil Grothma All Devouring,
Nice.
which I'm just gonna try in my Recce deck anyway, just to try it.
That works. We have a couple contest winners to announce.
Yes, we do.
So our first contest for the month of January was that beautifully full art altar of that ley line of anticipation done by Alters Richter on Twitter. We want to thank everybody. We had over 300 retweets between the 4
that was
weeks
fantastic.
we did this.
Yeah.
So we want to congratulate Ryan Bonig, and he can be found at Ryan Bonig. He will be the winner of that card.
Very cool.
And then for Patreon this week, this month, we are giving away the Ravnica Allegiance bundle, sponsored by D20 here in Eau Claire. And that winner is going to be Dylan Bloom, one of our Patreon supporters.
Very good. Well, thank you very much for your support, Dylan, and everyone else who supports us. We'll be reaching out to you guys before the show airs,
Most likely.
or at least that day,
Yes.
to let you know. So thank you very much. We appreciate it.
So this week, we are going to announce our new Twitter contest. We haven't quite figured out what we're going to do for Patreon this month, so stay tuned to Twitter and patreon.com/CMDR Central later this week for the announcement of what we're doing for that. But for Twitter...
A free date certificate with Max.
There we go. That's not a bad idea. Let's make that
24 hours with Max.
And it is Valentine's month. We do have Valentine's Day this month.
Travel not included unless you fly me out. So we are going to keep going with this altar business here on Twitter. Nice. So this month we are going to be giving away one of the Sunforger foil peel altars that a friend of the show, Patreon supporter, and overall Magic enthusiast Rafael Garcia did for us.
He made 2 for Chris. Chris is running one in a deck, and the other one we're going to give away.
Yes. So he can be found on Twitter at RAGARCI2. Contact him if you like the picture. He does do commissions, and he'll work that out with you privately.
Yes, he will.
So we'll be, again, posting that picture every Tuesday through the month of February.
Very good. And then next week's show, we should have figured out what we're going to do for Patreon giveaway this month as well. All right, let's move into the main body of the show and introduce our guest, DJ from Jumbo Commander. Welcome to Commander Central.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, I love hanging out with my friends.
Well, we appreciate being called your friends. Thank you very much. Glad to have you on.
Thank you, DJ.
Well, I've actually personally shaken 2 of your hands, but
You have.
we have to say what's up with Chris that like I haven't met him before.
I'm a ninja. I hide.
He was there. He was just stealthy.
I have met you. Just you're all sneaky. Okay, that's kind of creepy.
That might change this year.
We're actually,
It might.
he's supposedly going to make it to Vegas. We shall see.
I'm going to try. It's hard having a
Peer
wife
pressure.
and
Does
kid
peer
and
pressure
all that.
work? I have a wife and kid.
That's true.
He has a newborn.
I believe you brought them with last year at some point.
I totally did. I totally brought him to Vegas with me. Yeah. That actually didn't go over very well. My wife got slammed with work, and my baby was just like running around the hotel room, and my wife was super frazzled, and I was like, I'm having a great time playing EDH.
Well, I think Ryan and Brando from CCO Podcast brought their wives with last year too, and they kind of said the same thing. Like they felt like they were either neglecting their family, or when they weren't and they were having fun, they felt then bad for having fun while they were neglecting their family.
See, Magic is a whole family game. Everyone can totally enjoy it always.
Right, exactly. That's the key, is just to get your significant other to also play Magic.
You got jokes.
I was going to say tried and failed.
Have you made an attempt to get your wife to play, DJ? Or does she play? I guess I don't know.
No, she totally doesn't play, but she loves games. I taught it to her at one point in time, and she's like, I see how this game is played. It's not that hard, but I will never, ever put in the time that it takes to actually give you a real game of Magic. So we're just going to call it right here, and let's just go play a game that I'm good at. I'm like, all right, that's fine.
That was kind of the reaction I got from my wife. We played, and she figured everything out, and then once she realized it wasn't just that deck, like the deck she was playing wasn't just the game, that there was an additional 20,000 cards, that was the end for her. She lost interest at that point. Like, nope, there's too much stuff here. Let's play Scrabble.
I attempted once, and I got a bunch of what if. I'm like, you're overthinking this for a beginner.
That's exactly what I got.
Okay, so DJ, you've been making YouTube videos for what, about 2.5 years now? Has it been that long?
Yeah, something like that. And it's been pretty consistent, which I've been super proud of, by the way.
Yeah, like every week there's at least something from you out there.
If not,
That's what I try to do, is just hit it every week. Yeah.
So what inspired you to first get started in the first place? Like what made you just decide this is what I'm going to do? I'm going to put stuff on YouTube and I'm going to do it consistently and weekly and be a content creator.
Yeah, well, it started off with some of my friends that I played Magic with. They just kind of drifted away. They just stopped playing Magic. They moved away. And I just honestly wasn't playing as much Commander as I wanted to. And I was here building decks and geeking out, and no one was there to share them with. I couldn't sling cards, and it just frustrated me. So instead, I decided to yell into the void that is the internet and just say, look, here's the cool stuff I'm thinking about with Commander. And so it started off strong with a 45-minute ramble about my favorite deck and why I love it. And it just kind of ended up building from there.
So that first video, the first yell into the void, is that one actually online? Is that your first video out there?
That's my first video. It's the Braids video, and it is a little bit rambly. It's not extremely well produced, but it's still up there, and I'll keep it up there. It's a nice little video to have as a reminder of, hey, this is where I came from. This is how I started making content.
So speaking of that first video, obviously it's your blue Braids deck. It's what you're known for. You kicked Dana and my butt with it at GP Vegas last year.
You did, actually. Yeah, you won handily with that deck in a 5-player game.
Now, were you like us and did about some practice episodes that have never seen the light of day? Or did you just do that one and shoot it out to the public?
I ended up working on a few different videos at the same time. They kind of all eventually made it, like the Dragon deck, the Jund Dragon deck that I did after that, and the Teamer many combos deck, Riku of all the combos. So those ones I was kind of working on simultaneously. And yeah, there was definitely a little bit of a learning curve when trying to put some stuff together. But I mean, once I made a deck tech, I did eventually put it out there on the internet, even though I might have recorded few different scripts or messed around with the editing a little bit.
I've actually seen that Braids deck cited by people as a deck they've then copied to make because they had never considered Braids before until seeing your tech. I've heard that from probably 3 or 4 different people, both in person, and I think one of the guys at Brothers War podcast said the same thing. So I've heard multiple people cite your deck tech as a reason they've built Braids.
Oh my gosh, you have no idea how happy that makes me, that my little corner commander can sort of be shouted out there and everyone else is like, oh my gosh, there's potential here where I didn't see it before. And then they just go off into their own binders. You go through your collection and start pulling out the big monsters you want to put in your deck, the sneaky interaction you want to throw in there. And suddenly they have something that not only is really cool for their own deck, but also interacts with everyone else at the table. I love it.
I mean, I'll even say this. My Regna and Krav deck was based off of your video. I started with that list and tuned it for our meta, our shop, and how I play.
That's exactly how Magic should be. And in many really robust play groups, you might this experience might happen naturally, where you sort of see a deck at a shop and you're like, oh, this is really cool. I'm going to take this idea. I'm going to take that idea. But so often we don't have those huge play groups. We don't have all of this community. So instead, we take to internet, we take to Twitter and online, and that's also a great place to just get inspiration and see the other things that are out there. And I do the same thing. I run into people with decks at GPs. I listen to other content, and you take in all these new ideas and you throw them together and you make something that fits yourself, even if it might have originated from someone else. The inspiration might come from another source.
So DJ, I got a question for you. Your very first video you did you get a lot of viewers on that? Was it received well, or was it more of a dump type of deal? It just no one liked it.
How long did it take for you to click?
It was definitely a trickle. But here's the thing though, when you put out a video, you don't if you put out a 45-minute long video about rambling about Magic and EDH and a mono blue Braids deck, how many views are you actually expecting? So when I got 10, I was like, I'm a genius. This is amazing.
I absolutely know that feeling.
Yeah,
Like
and then
that
I felt so good in that moment, and people are commenting and like, "Hey, this is pretty cool." And then it kind of gives you a little bit of a boost to keep moving and keep sort of exploring other things. But yeah, it's a different perspective, and it was a fun moment when that video got even like a little bit of traction.
So at this point, you're at like 50,000 subscribers on YouTube, which is an insane amount.
Dang.
And 200 videos or slightly over 200 videos. Was there one video or one moment when you kind of turned a corner and became like a legitimately known Magic personality where you went from like just somebody who's making videos to somebody who people were talking about in that context?
So there was a little bit of a moment. Every single milestone, you kind of think like, oh, wow, this is kind of cool. Or when you meet someone and someone knows you, it's kind of like, oh, great. But like, I think there was a specific moment. I went to a GP Seattle and I was hanging out with friends. I was walking around meeting people that I'd seen at other GPs. I love going to GPs. I used to go a lot and just hanging out with some Magic folk. And it seemed to be like a total like normal GP experience, even though I met up with some fans, some patrons came, we played some games. It felt really normal. And then I went to GP Vegas and it was like people were coming up to me and it was talking about decks and here and there. And I was signing cards and taking selfies with people. That wasn't a thing that happened before, but it was so great to see the enthusiasm of all the cool people saying like, I saw this and I did this, or this is the deck I have. And just the swell of love and excitement from everyone just was so over the top. It was crazy. And then the person that was just with me in Seattle said, what happened in the last like month? What is going on? I'm like, yeah. So I think it took a critical mass of cool people interacting with me to realize like that this is not normal anymore. This is a little weird.
I think the first video of yours I saw was your Neheb, the Eternal Deck Tech show you did. And so that I was paying attention at that point, but then you did one a couple months after that was the You Are Doing It Wrong show on Exile Effects.
that got a lot of views. Do you know what? Clickbait really does work.
Well, sure, that's right. But it's also like
people will scream in the comments like clickbait or stuff like that, and I'm like, you are absolutely right. There's a reason why BuzzFeed works. Yeah,
exactly.
It works so much.
But it's also a really good show. It's like it's really informative and well done and succinct, and you pack a lot of information into a relatively short video. So like that was one that really popped me. Like this is a guy who's got a lot of really interesting stuff to say.
And I wish that there was more corner cases like that and more things that people could really get excited about. Those are the kinds of videos that requires a little bit more energy from me because I'm like, well, how do I talk about Exile Effects in a different way? Like, how on earth do you do that? I don't even know if it was successful. I think that was the clickbait that brought people in and then people got angry. And then that's why the video got a lot of traction. I don't know if people really like watching videos about rules, interactions and stuff like that. That's why sort of the deck tech is my bread and butter because man, I love brewing. I love it.
So DJ, you were just on, I believe, your first episode of Game Nights a few weeks ago, and you played new Teysa Karlov deck.
Yeah, I chose Teysa because she's awesome. Death Harmonicon is super cool. And Josh said Prime Speaker Vannifar is way too powerful. It's on the table for no one.
I wondered about that because you did a Vannifar, or no, it wasn't you. They did that on...
DJ did one too.
DJ did one too, okay.
I did one too, yeah.
But no one played Vannifar. I was wondering if there was a reason for that.
Oh, yeah. We all looked at Vannifar and were like, oh my gosh, this is just so good. And then everyone was clamoring, no Vannifar for anyone. And so then it was kind of a free-for-all, and it feels like people really ended up in the colors that they wanted to be in.
That's great. So, like, for our listeners who haven't gone and watched that video, and you guys really should head over to the Command Zone YouTube channel, watch that Game Nights episode. What were some of your most memorable moments from that game?
The game actually is, I mean, 'cause spoilers, I think that was covered by Max said. But the game wasn't actually very long at all. Jimmy came out swinging. Oh my gosh, his deck was crazy. I was like planning on dirtling for tons of different turns and stuff like that. Vinny was just going to go roll smash. And Jimmy was like, nah, I'm going to win the game now. Yeah. So that was definitely a memorable moment when Jimmy was like, expropriate. Temporal manipulation time stretch, and I was like, oh, okay.
Well,
right before that game,
right before he went off, though, I was like, oh, DJ's got this, and no one knows it yet. He's got so much value, and he's just gonna it's gonna be that rock rolling downhill where you just can't stop it. And then all of a sudden, that planar bridge comes down. I'm like, ooh, maybe not.
Yeah, I was hoping that that our decks would be a little bit more balanced and the game would go a lot longer and that my full grip of cards would pay off. So I was more focused on hitting land drops and maintaining board position than keeping Jimmy in check.
How much grief did you get for using that other end on the Mana Gorger instead of the planar bridge?
Oh, I didn't even focus on that because I'm sure it was a lot. But one thing that was cut out because it wasn't really interesting is literally I looked at Vinny and said, I have an other end. If you just don't attack me, it gets aimed at the planar bridge.
Oh, wow.
And so it was basically a threat. Now, here's the thing. That should have been a bluff. No matter what.
Right.
When Vinny attacked me, I should have been like, you called my bluff and killed the planar bridge. But I don't know what got into me. I kind of just decided that, no, Vinny, you can't just get a free attack out on me. What I should have done is then turned to Jimmy and said, okay, Vinny's clearly not wheeling and dealing. Now you give me something sweet. But I didn't do that. Instead, I just impulse killed that. I kind of thought that Jimmy was a control deck and that he was going to wipe the board. And currently on the board, I had a lot of card draw, but also a lot of life loss. And same thing with Josh's board when it gets wiped away. That's a lot of incidental damage.
Oh, sure.
So I was thinking that Jimmy was a control deck and that I could let him have a little bit more control as long as I kept my life total up enough and my card draw up enough. But yeah, he instead just won the game.
Taking all the extra turns is, I guess, control in its own way.
Yeah.
Or you get banned on Arena if you do that.
If you keep just looping the same Nexus of Fate over and over. Yeah.
I wouldn't put him past him. That Jimmy's sneaky.
So last summer you did a tour of your 34 commander decks. 34. Wow, that's 34. A big number.
That's a serious number.
Are those all together?
So at one point in time, I tried to get every color combination and I achieved it for a little bit. And then I realized that, that wasn't what I was all about. So I started changing and tweaking them. And actually just recently I decided that 34 decks is a little bit too much. So I started breaking down certain decks. So now I'm down to, I think 18 instead of 34.
Well,
so that's a huge purge of my collection.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I've never moved all 34 decks anywhere besides my home. My thing is I usually go out with 4 at a time. So I just load up the 4 and I go out with 4 every single time. And that's what I play with that night.
Well, in once you get to 4 too, that amount is manageable in one evening when you're trying to switch decks every single game to a different one. Your play style, at least I can't maintain playing different decks that have different play styles. I just start playing, hey, this control deck, and I'm playing an aggro because I played an aggro deck last game.
We need to put time locks on half of Dana's decks. So it's X o'clock at night. You can't play this deck. This doesn't open up.
Yeah, 11 o'clock at night, I'm like, I can't play a deck with a bunch of triggers. I just fall. My game falls completely apart at that point.
I usually just like to bring, if we're talking about decks that we like to bring and cultivate with us and stuff like that, I usually like to pick decks of different power levels and decks that play differently so I can have sort of a different experience at every single time in the night. And it's definitely a pro to be able to have a deck that you just can play goofy at the end of the night. Be like, all right, I'm just going to play something fun. Don't care about those triggers. Maybe just like a Gruul deck that you go in and just smash people with. That sounds good.
So how did you decide which of the decks to dismantle? Was that one of the things you were kind of factoring in? Like, these two decks play the same, these ones are similar in whatever the theme is. Was there a decision-making process there, or did you just take apart ones that you played the least?
Yeah, so there was definitely a decision-making process, and it usually had to do with how the decks played, like you mentioned earlier. So there were a few decks that, for example, were supposed to be sort of aggressive in different ways, but it turned out that they both sort of leaned heavily on artifacts and equipment and stuff like that, and it just felt like they were the same deck and just wasn't very exciting. I also realized that pure control decks weren't fun for me to play. I had some powerful ones, but I don't really want to be playing that style. I'd rather have a little bit more of like some threats, some control. I've gravitated towards more well-rounded decks where maybe it can do something and have a pretty powerful board presence, but then pivot into a combo win if I want to go that direction, or pivot into some more controlling strategies. So I've gravitated towards decks that are less linear and more flexible.
I would say that's probably definitely something that I've noticed with myself as well. Like, if a deck gets too linear, I just lose interest. Like, it doesn't matter how effective it is. That's something that makes me abandon a deck. How about Max and Chris? Do you have any thoughts on what makes you bail on one or decide it's time to take it apart too?
When people start targeting me, it's one of the reasons I don't play Ural or Mogus a whole lot anymore.
That's true, because like if you're playing a deck that's either maybe difficult to play against because it's like destroying hands or whatever, or you're playing a deck that's just really, really effective, you can get to that point where you draw so much aggro in games that it becomes then unfun because you can't play, kind of.
I don't know. I've had the same 4 decks for almost a year now. I haven't taken any apart, added any new ones. Maybe I just don't play a deck for a couple weeks and people forget about it. And then 3 weeks later I pull out Brago and they're like, oh, you still have that. We didn't come prepared.
Well, that's not a bad idea, though.
So, Max, do you think that you do a little bit more tinkering because you have those 4 decks that are your baby? You know, I listened to your guys' podcast, and it seems like you try out a lot of cards and switch them around and do a lot more of real fine-tuning and trying out other stuff, maybe compared to a lot of other Commander players.
Yeah, that would definitely be true for me. I'm more of a tinkerer than a brewer, to say. Like, you like to brew, I like to find a deck and put 100% of my effort into that deck for the course of time. So I do a lot of play testing through like Tapped Out, where I'll play test a deck against my other decks, 4 windows open, and then be like, okay, this card from Ravnica Legions doesn't work, get it out. And then that's kind of how I make my decision of going over, like, I need these new cards for these decks.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that is some dedication right there. I don't think I could do that, just honestly, right there. Jeez, that's awesome.
I come home after Commander Night. We usually play on Tuesday nights, and I drive home and I get into bed and I lie awake for 20 minutes to half an hour just thinking about what changes I want to make to decks. Like, I can't fall asleep for 20 minutes or a half an hour because my brain is spinning thinking about, okay, in this one deck, I could pull this one card because it didn't do enough, and I could use one more draw spell, or I could use one more. So like, I do that. That's like, my brain will not shut off that night as I'm thinking about stuff to tweak, which probably isn't healthy, but that's what I do.
There are worse things to think about.
They're probably definitely true.
I have that problem before tournament day. All I do is that night before I don't sleep. And I
just thinking about it, yeah.
I'm like, okay, turn 1, this is how my hand should look. I'm going to do this and this and this. And then I go into a tournament and the deck's like, nope, we're not going to do any of that.
So how often do you make changes to your decks then, DJ, if you're not a big tweaker like that? How often does it come? Do you like just do it when you've played a deck and found a weakness? Or is it something like once a month you give them all a soft pass? Or do you not have a particular habit or pattern for doing that?
Yeah, so I have a feeling that I do it differently than a lot of other people do it. For example, I don't have any Ravnica Allegiance or even actually Guilds of Ravnica cards in any of my decks right now, like maybe 1 or something like that, because I don't like buying cards at release. I like buying cards at rotation. So right now I'm kind of like focusing on Dominaria cards and having them, I know it's not quite at rotation, but like they're out of hype, like the ones that aren't spiked and stuff like that. So those are the ones that I'm tinkering with right now. And those are the ones that I'm adding to decks right now. And they've been around for so long and we've been talking about them for so long. I've seen them around. I've kind of like processed them. I kind of know exactly where I want them and when I don't want them. And so when I release those videos of like, hey, you might have forgotten about this set, it's time to buy blank. That's actually when I'm like buying these cards and putting them into my deck.
Okay, that makes sense.
Thank you for those videos, by the way. Your Amonkhet and Hour of Devastation ones got me a lot of good cards for really cheap.
They're so good. Oh my gosh. They're putting out a lot of really strong commander cards. And after so long, like people just kind of forget about them after the hype. And I mean, I'm just amazed that like things like Swarm Intelligence was like pennies and the cycle lands are amazing. Oh my God. Don't let me talk about that.
Well, I will tell you.
The one downside though that I do indulge in is that for my cube, if there's a cube worthy card, I like immediately buy a foil for it or some sort of promo for it, like just like immediately as soon as I can. So that's my like indulgent side where I'm like, I need to own this right now for the cube. And then for commander decks, it's like, all right, I'm going to wait a little bit and let these things kind of figure themselves out.
Well, now my system is a little different than that. So here's what I do. During spoiler week, I know that spoilers will be, the full list will be out on Friday morning in most cases at usually 10 o'clock my time. So I intentionally make sure I have nothing scheduled at work during the time when the full list is out. And I block off, I make sure my work's caught up, and I block off an hour or so. And the second that full list is up, I have a text document out, and I have my decks all up online, and I'm going through immediately making cuts. So
wow, that's
like,
awesome.
Like literally the time it's live, I'm going through and already like figuring out what cards I want to put in and what changes I want to make.
And all of you guys, you're very much like you keep your decks updated online and you're using resources like Tapped Out and stuff like that.
Max and I do. Chris updates his once every 6 to 8 months, I think, online.
When you guys harass me.
When we harass him and updating them, he actually does. Max and I are pretty good about it. I'm probably a little better than Max is even. Yeah. So I keep mine are updated, twice a week with changes I make, whereas I don't know if Max is quite as vigilant.
I dedicate one Saturday a month where I sit down and I say, okay, I'm going to do 2 of my 4 decks today. Like I just did Regnan, Krav, and Tajik this past weekend. I went through and I made all the changes on deck stats and like, okay, we're good for 2 weeks.
Wow. By the way, Chris, I don't think I have a single deck of mine on like Tapped Out. I might have decks that I produced and like put up on the internet and stuff like that. Like I have tons of decks on Tapped Out, but like the actual ones that I own, they've changed, they've shifted, and I don't update Tapped Out. So pretty much a deck that I pull out of my box is something that is just not on the internet. And yeah, just don't use it at all. Just like to scroll through paper style and figure out what I'm doing with it.
See? You two over here, see?
Yeah, that is not me who has to stare at his list online obsessively trying to figure out what one card is coming out to make room for this one new card that's going in.
Yeah, same here.
You just gotta kind of wing it. You just kind of like go through it and it's like, oh, I haven't seen my Soul Ring in 6 months, so we'll just take it out.
Sure,
it's not like I play it anyways.
Good. Okay, that's why because it's a real thing people have a problem with where they talk about, I just realized my deck was down to 32 lands because I was pulling a land out and putting in a new card, and that's a real problem people wind up with their decks. And I always think, but how? Aren't you staring at your deck list 3 times a week to figure out what tweaks you want to make? Well, clearly they're not doing that. That's just me.
You are very disciplined.
I guess I'm something.
I'm gonna give Dana credit here. He has moved away from the spreadsheets that were updated and dated with every card he took in and out, what day he did it, and when it got put back in.
I used to log every change to every deck in a spreadsheet.
Yeah, it was obscene. I actually have a couple copies still from back about 4 years ago when we were still doing it.
Perfectly normal behavior.
New Twitter giveaway.
Yeah.
Dana's spreadsheets.
Dana's old spreadsheets that are like 180 changes deep on one deck.
There's an adjective for that. I don't know. I don't know what it is,
there's some word you could use to describe it we're not going to say here in this family show.
Yeah, I think that the same thing that draws a lot of people to Commanders draws me to it as well, which is good, you know. But it's basically, does it do something unique? Does it do something that is interactive? That's like a really big thing for me. Is does it like make me interact with other people at a Commander table? Because this game is multiplayer. We want to be hanging out with our friends and interacting with our opponents and having table talk and stuff like that. So if there's a cool mechanic or specifically something that lets me mess with your board or you know, go after what you're doing, oh my gosh, I love it so much. Which is why Prime Speaker Vanifar, it's a very cool card, but I'm not going to build that deck. I've played with Birthing Pod. It's kind of cool. It doesn't really interact with your board. It's more like me doing my own thing on my own playmat. So I don't know. I'm not really excited about it. But like, you take one of my newer decks that I've built, O Kagachi Vengeful Kami, which is about, which we might need a read on that because it's not a normal card.
Hold up, I'll pull it up right now.
Okay, good.
So, for our listeners at home, Okagachi Vengeful Kami is 1 and Esper, 1 in Wooburg, legendary creature dragon spirit, flying trample. It's a 6/6, and whenever Okagachi deals combat damage to a player, if that player attacked you during their last turn, exile target non-land permanent that player controls.
I do
Wow.
believe when
So-
we did the spoiler for this, when it came out, when we did the review for the Commander set, we said this card was trash.
Did we?
I'm pretty sure we did.
Well, you probably did, because that's your go-to.
So what
It
made
lets you play 5 colors. Come on.
Right.
That's got to be worth something.
So what made you
But
want
I
to brew
love
that
the
deck?
idea. It's the idea of interacting with your opponents. It's like, you attack me, I'm going to attack you, exile something. I'm going to put a salt suit on it and let Max swing with it, and then
Nice.
give it to Chris the next turn and let him swing with it. I'm going to have all sorts of cool interactions with everyone around the table. That's why I love Braids so much. That's why I really gravitate towards a lot of the interesting interactions, because it really opens up the game to let other people play. And honestly, it's the human interaction that makes the game super duper fun.
We had on the EDH Recast, we had a writer from the show, Henry Stukenberg, on a month or two ago, and one thing Henry made a point about was, he said when he's trying to brew a deck or build a deck, he always wants to make sure he's not wasting the other person's time. He assumes that you have limited time to play because he does, and he wants to make sure the people he's playing with are at least enjoying themselves and not feeling like they've just sat there doing nothing or watched you solitaire. And I hadn't really thought about it in terms of like people's time being valuable and not wanting to use it up in a way that isn't an enjoyable experience. But after he said that, that really resonated with me as a player. I want the people that I'm playing against to have walked away from that game feeling like they spent their hour wisely.
I can get behind that, and I agree with that in many aspects. Like, I've had Storm listed in the past because I love playing Storm and Cube and tinkering with that, and I realize it's not fun in Commander. It's just not. So I've broken apart my Storm decks because it just wasn't fun. But I gotta say, I do love dirtling, and if Turbo Fog is wasting my opponent's time, or just like messing with people over and over again as I gain incremental value, I do have to say I do enjoy that quite a bit.
So for Ravnica Allegiance, you had Lumbering Battlement as a preview card. Now I'm just going to wing this. I do believe I remember what it is. The 5-mana, 4/5, comes into play, exile any number of creatures, gets +2/+2 for each creature exiled with it. And then they come back
And
into play.
Vigilance.
What was that?
And Vigilance.
And Vigilance. Even better.
It doesn't have flash, though.
Hey, you don't need flash.
I know.
It's a white card. They don't need flash.
I do.
So is this card going to go into any of your decks?
I have to say no, not right now. I really wish that it would, though. I don't have a rune deck. I think that's where it would be really strong. I don't have a lot of decks where I want to protect my board and have like a big beater. I think that it could go in some decks, but I don't have those decks right now, and so it makes me sad. No.
And I think the big downfall with that card, though, is it says exile any non-token creatures. So if you're doing like You can't really cheat it with tokens and just
Right.
make it huge. You actually have to get rid of something that could be giving you value.
Yeah, it's a cool
Yeah.
card, but that's been kind of, I remember multiple people talking about that in different Discords and Slacks about Commander. Everyone's like, this is a really cool card, and I don't know where I would run it.
Yeah, you don't even get
Yeah.
death triggers off of it.
Right.
That is where I am with that card with Brago. Everybody was like, this is going in Brago, right? I'm like, honestly, no. Like, I get
Brago already does all that. Yeah, it already does multiple triggers.
right. I get when I blink it, I'll get all the ETB triggers of it bringing everything back, and I'll save them again. But that leaves it in Brago, honestly, and I don't want to do that.
Yeah, I don't think it's a good fit in Brago because Brago goes wide on its triggers. Anyways, that's the power of Brago, and this is like a tool that lets a normal blinker become sort of a Brago effect, which is very cool because we know the power that it is to get multiple of those triggers. That's why Rune is just kind of like, okay, you get one. But if you can sort of use this as a tool to multiply it into your entire board of triggers, yeah, we know that that's good.
So you said you don't plan on doing, you're several sets behind kind of in terms of putting decks or putting cards into your decks. But just based on things you've seen so far from Allegiance, is there any cards that are really jumping out at you that you think when the time comes, you're probably definitely slotting them into a certain deck?
If you saw my deck that I had played on extra turns on the Command Zone channel, it's my Mardu Artifact Aggro deck. Yeah, I love that deck. It's great. And Smothering Tithe is amazing in it because it just generates artifacts, and my Akiri Lineslinger will end up being huge, and then it'll ramp me into even more awesome stuff. I can't wait to get one. I'm just itching for it so badly.
Do you have any wheel effects in that deck to further abuse Smothering Tithe?
No, not really. That deck is quite linear with like a combo like back end. And so my card draw comes in the form of sort of recycling artifacts, not necessarily sort of the big wheel effect.
Yeah,
that is cool.
I like Tithe a lot, but I do at some point want to be in that game where like someone casts a Wheel of Fortune with Smothering Tithe out and just makes all the tokens possible.
Oh, I love it so much.
Yeah, and Mardu's perfect for it because you can have Tithe and you can have
Revel and Riches.
Revel and Riches, yeah.
Indeed I can.
No.
I don't have any wheels, but I do have Revel and Smothering Tithe in the new Tesa deck I'm putting together. So I will see if I can get that combo going without the wheels.
I think there's only one
Oh,
wheel
yeah.
in white and black, isn't there?
There's a black one that you draw a card, one less card.
Yeah, which is out of like
Dark
the cons
deal.
block.
Yeah.
Dark Deal?
Dark Deal.
Yeah.
Yep, there we go.
Yeah.
See, I should put that in the deck just to do it. I'll do that. I'll put it in just in the off chance I happen to have them all out. I'll try that.
I'll be impressed when you actually play Tesa.
Right, yeah. Next week I will have it together. It'll be
21
done.
mana later.
It's 14 mana.
Just to be clear, this is bad Tesa. I am playing Tesa Envoy of Ghosts.
Oh, bad Tesa.
Yes,
oh,
indeed.
that's great. All right.
And I'm playing bad Tesa Voltron. Because definitely
good
Orzhov
for you.
equipment.
It has protection from creatures people aren't blocking.
There we go. And she stays back with Vigilance. And she
The
costs
value.
190 mana to cast, but we will deal with that when the time comes.
With no ramp.
There's no ramp. There's artifacts.
You're going to end
I'm
up
gonna
playing
make-
with like a hanger back walker or
I'm
something.
going to make it work.
We just talked about Smothering Tithe.
There we go.
Like,
See, I have all the ramp I need. Smothering Tithe, and I can get Tesa out on turn 5 instead of turn 7.
5 or 6. Yeah,
right,
that's fine.
exactly. Throw some swords on her, I'm good to go. I'm going to make it happen. I'm telling you, it's going to happen.
I'll blow that Return to Dust at instant
Right,
speed
exactly.
To get rid of
That's
that Smothering Tithe. That won't even
that
work.
first Vandal Blast, and I'm done.
So here's a question for you then. Since you have so many decks, do you swap out high-costed cards such as duels? We'll go reserve list. Or do you just find like multiple copies? Or do you just use a super cheap alternative?
I don't swap out cards, mostly because I'm lazy and then I'll lose track of them. And remember, we've already covered, I don't have these lists online. So if
sure.
if I just start swapping cards out, then suddenly like my deck is in pieces and I'm like playing with 88 cards and I have no idea what's going on. So that's actually one area that I do have a lot of discipline where it's like, this deck is going to operate as it's supposed to. And I can still tinker with that. But if it needs a mana crypt, then I'll find the mana crypt for it, and it belongs in there. And if it needs duels, if I decide that that's the level of deck that it's going to have, then I'll try to have it in there. But then I'll have other decks that I'm like, you know what, the power level of this, the way that it operates, my Okagachi Vengeful Kami deck does not need Uber duels, like Alpha, Beta, Unlimited, Revised duels. Like, they just don't. It's not the tone of the deck. And so I go out of my way to try and make sure that my decks can fit within the collection I have, which I've been playing Magic for a little while now, so I do have a lot of cards, so some of them can kind of like exist between them. So that's a luxury that I have, that I can have this many decks and still have Shocklands for a lot of them.
Well, I do remember when you were doing your whirlwind tour of your 34 decks, you're like, here's my Hazazen Tamar deck. And then like 5 minutes later, like, and here's my other deck that has a Hazazen Tamar in it. It's like, oh, all right, well, if you're not swapping that between decks, I assume you probably weren't doing much card swapping at all.
Yeah, I don't do card swapping. And I think that for some people, it's great. Vinny, from Game Nights, you might have seen him on the Command Zone, he has an awesome binder system kind of thing where he has all of his best cards kind of in a little thing next to him, and he'll, pull out the card in his deck and then boom, get the copy of that's shared between multiple decks. I just don't have the organization for that, but I have no problem if other people decide that that's the way that they want to go to make sure that they get the cards they want. But I also totally believe that restriction breeds creativity. And so if you're making a budget deck, you find that you have to be a little bit more creative. If you're using your own personal collection, you have to be so much more creative than just using every card in Magic's history at your disposal. If you are saying, no, I'm not going to take this card from my other deck, then it does get your brain going to try to figure out a solution and make your deck work.
Yeah, I'm really on board with that too. I'm of the same mindset. Like, if somebody else wants to bind your system cards, I totally get it. It makes complete sense. But for myself, I like that kind of self-imposed restriction. Yes, you could put a Gaia's Cradle in a whole lot of different green decks, but I like the fact that, if I want to do that, I need to force myself to get multiple Cradles, and I'm clearly not going to do that. So I just have to decide I've got one Cradle that goes in one deck, and that's just what it is.
The deck you never play.
And it's in a deck I never play, right? So, and that's fine, though. Like, I'm fine with that because I don't want to put it in other decks, so I'll just leave it there, and that's okay, too.
Just so you know, I pushed really hard when we did our 1v1 ban at our store.
To ban Cradle?
No, to unban Edric.
Oh, you did?
I tried really hard, and no one would hear me
I would have came and played my Edric deck if that was the case.
That would have just been Edric mirrors all day long.
Or
yeah, in 1v1, yeah, Edric would definitely be played pretty heavily. So
there's your Edric deck you don't play. That's kind of a deck that's moved to the side that maybe hasn't seen the light of day for a little while.
I still update it regularly. I did put 2 cards from Allegiance in it, so I still maintain it. But power level wise, it's not friendly. It's probably closing in on CEDH levels. So unless I'm playing with that kind of pod, I just don't want to play it against people. Or if I'm playing, it's like sometimes my revenge deck too. If someone's been a jerk, and I'm like, okay, I just want to shut this person down. But I mean, I don't think I've played it since. I think I played it at Vegas, and I think that maybe the last time I've played it was at GP Vegas last summer. So it's just not something I routinely break out.
I haven't seen your backpack in weeks neither. Every time I go to borrow a deck, I'm like, oh, is it in there? Oh, no, I guess not.
Of course you're looking for the Edric deck. Jeez.
He is the Spike on the show.
Chris is the closest way. Yeah, much spikier than I am for sure.
Well, speaking of backpacks, so DJ, you have 18 decks currently. You say you technically probably bring 4 to your normal game night, but when you go to like Magic Fest or GPs, do you bring more than 4? And if so, how do you bring them all with you?
When I go to GPs, I bring 8 decks, and I bring them in. The thing that I like is boulder cases and archives that hold 4. So I'll bring 2 archives, all with boulder cases in them, and one of them will stay in my hotel room, and I'll swap in between them the decks that I want to take. And that's another part of restriction and limiting myself is like, look, I'm only going to bring 4 to this event. I used to bring more, and it's not a good idea. You sometimes don't play decks, and it's heavy, and it's a whole day, and yeah, it's not worth it. So 4 decks.
I had too much at Vegas last year. I will not make that mistake again.
Yeah, I mean, I brought 2 archives with me last summer, but one was filled with trade-in fodder. But even carrying 4 decks around was a pain all day long with all the other merchandise you pick up and walking a couple miles every other day, and it was a pain.
Just need a wheelie backpack.
Yeah, well, really, like that's
If you
want to
be cool,
idea.
you have a wheelie backpack.
So how about at
So
home?
the moral,
What is your
the
card?
moral of the story? Sorry, the moral of the story is that you guys should all go to a Grand Prix and all go to GP Vegas so that you can play Commander, do all this cool stuff that everyone is talking about.
Absolutely, that should be the takeaway from this: is absolutely go to GP Vegas.
Yes.
So how about like at home? What is your storage or card management situation like? Do you have the random piles of cards scattered throughout one room that is your card storage room, or are you pretty organized with all of this?
I still have cards all over the place. Don't get me wrong, but I am quite organized with this. Basically, I have. So here's a tip for people that find themselves kind of like with cards everywhere and they have a hard time. You need to have an intake system because you're gonna be tinkering. You're gonna take cards out of binders or other decks or whatever you have and be laying them out and stuff like that. What you need to be able to do is afterwards have a place to put those cards, and then from that place, distribute them back to your system. So one thing that I have is I really like KMC 1500 plastic boxes. And so I have one of those as sort of an intake system where if I have a bunch of cards on my desk or if I'm tinkering with them and I need to put them back, I'll put them all into this one box. And then they get sorted back into binders. I have 3 binders for each color. One, like for example, if you take green, I have one for creatures, one for instants and sorceries, and then one for mana, and then I actually sort rocks that are artifacts that have green in it in there because I'm a commander player, and planeswalkers all in another binder. And usually those cards that make it in the binder are EDH playables or foils. And then I have a huge like 1,500 count box that's divided into different sections for all of the other cards that could be green. And that's like my green box. And then I have that for every color, for artifacts, for multicolor ends up being a little bit bigger than that. And then I also have a bunch of binders for basic lands and altars and stuff like that.
That's actually a good bit of advice for me. I just switched because I moved a couple months back and I went from a house where I had a room that was my office, quote unquote, but it was mostly just a magic room where I had like stacks of cards everywhere and it was semi-organized, but there was still stuff everywhere. And I bought a much smaller house that's like 100 years old, so it's designed like a 100-year-old house. I just no longer have room to store things. I have like one shelf in the basement. So I'm in the process of figuring out how to manage all of this and way less space available to me. So I like the idea of an input-output place where I stuff goes in this one collection, and then at that point I need to put it somewhere that's logically stored.
Yeah, you just sit down, you have a video going on or something like that, and you're like, all right, I'm going to sort this input box. And so you open it up and like it's kind of halfway sorted because like as you put them in there, like you're like, oh, these are like 20 black cards that, you know, I was playing with last month, and then you sort them out. That goes into the binders. You know what? This one actually isn't worth anything, and it's not something I use all the time. It'll go in the sort of the plastic box, and like, oh wait, this is like totally bulk, and I throw it in like a big cardboard bulk bin. And so that kind of ends up filtering out a lot of the stuff and basically letting you find what you need later on. That's the thing that drives me the craziest. It's like, I have this card, I really want it in this deck, I will not buy a new one.
Well, if talking about storing cards, I will quick mention this as an aside. If you've never seen it, or if our listeners haven't seen it, go to YouTube and go to Brian Canada's YouTube channel, Cure for the Common Game. He's building a deck for every commander ever, every legendary creature ever printed. He's making a deck. So he's up to like 350 decks, I think, so far. But he has pictures of his storage system. He basically has a shelf on one wall made of 2x4s. That's, I mean, floor to ceiling deck boxes as he's building.
He's a madman.
Yeah, it's insane. So if you haven't seen it, it's worth going to check out just to see his pictures. And he makes some pretty good video content too. But yeah, that is something impressive. That
I hope he has a label maker and he has that on every single
He
one of
does.
his deck
They're all
boxes.
labeled, yeah. But man, how do you
But you know what I do? I do kind of respect that a little bit because there's no way that he can play all of those decks.
Right.
But
yes.
it's so fun just like building and putting stuff together. And I find that some of the decks that I've held on to that used to be sort of a home for nostalgia, a home for great cards that I've loved so much. And I don't just want them sitting in a closed binder somewhere. I want them like in a place. And so I have some decks that I'm not going to break apart just because they're kind of homes for some of my favorite cards.
Yeah, that kind of came up a little bit on Twitter today. I mentioned some changes I was making to my Glissa the Trader deck, which is kind of my oldest and favorite deck. And I wound up pulling out Exsanguinate and Torment of Hailfire yet again. And
Just
some
to put them back in
well,
next
no,
week.
but right. But somebody asked me like, well, so how's your deck going to win now? Like, what's your win condition going to be? Because the deck didn't have a good one, and plenty of times that because it's a real slow kind of turtley deck that I'm difficult to kill. I try to the game goes long enough where I can just do a big Torment or Exsanguinate and win the game. I had to say, well, maybe I just don't. Like maybe I don't have win condition. Maybe I just have to grind people out, and if I can't win that way, I just die. That's what it is. But I like the deck so much that I'm just going to keep it even without that real true way to consistently close out games because there just isn't one in that deck, and that's what it is.
What's that artifact that combos with Glissa?
Mindslaver. I'm not going to run Mindslaver. I don't want to play Mindslaver in that deck either.
We tell people week in and week out to run Wincons,
I know.
and the main guy doesn't.
I know,
Right?
I know, but maybe in that deck, I just have to accept the fact that it's not that kind of deck.
Don't borrow.
Do all your
Glissa.
creatures?
Yep.
Do all your creatures have to have Death Touch? Is that the restriction
Yeah.
you have on yourself
Yeah.
in that deck? Okay.
So, I mean, I do have like an overrun in there, which is relatively easy to get damage through because you only need to put 1 point of damage into a creature if it has Death Touch with Trample. So that does help poke through some damage, but I just maybe that's a deck I love, and I just have to maybe accept that that's what it is. It's a nostalgia deck, and it's just maybe not going to close out games very consistently. And that's okay. You know, not every deck has to be something that you can always win with.
Well, you got to be able to win
I
at least
totally-
once.
I'll just play it against people who are playing weaker decks. I guess.
Okay,
I don't know.
So you're gonna pull out the like $5,000 foil deck and just be like, "Yeah, what's up?"
There's no Wincon. Don't worry.
Right. That's true. My most expensive deck will be my weakest deck. That's what's going to wind up being is my foiled out
This
deck.
is Dana's long con. This is his
Right,
long
yeah.
con, basically.
Maybe
He's gonna just
I'm
you're gonna
setting up
go into the
listeners.
next game. He's gonna have no win. He's gonna say like, "Oh, this is no win condition deck." You'll leave him alone, and then suddenly, like, bam, you're all dead.
Here comes a
through
Mindslaver, y'all.
something. Exactly.
Oh boy.
That's a good idea. If anyone complains, I'll say it was DJ's suggestion.
I love that you could play Mindslaver. Go for it. I think that's an awesome card.
Well, the one thing about Mindslaver, at least, like you have to get yourself in the position to do that. It's not just like you draw Mindslaver and win. There's a lot of things that have to occur to get a Mindslaver lock to win a game.
Yeah, your commander that recurs artifacts kind of helps. So.
That makes it slightly easier, I will admit. So, DJ, do you have any big plans for the channel this year beyond just continuing to create content every week?
So I have been looking at exploring some other types of decks, some other types of videos and stuff like that. But for the most part, what I really want to do is just interact more with people. I really like hanging out with you guys. And so just coming on this podcast, like I haven't been on a lot of other podcasts or had other people on my show and kind of tied the community together. And I like that. I like hanging out with people and talking about it. That's why I like Commander. And so that's going to be sort of a big push for me. I also need to treat my patrons a little bit better. So I'm going to be making some good stuff for them too, so that they feel like loved and appreciated, because they are. And also I want to like personally just like kind of play some more Magic. I don't play Magic very often, and it's so depressing.
Like if I miss my weekly EDH night, I get antsy. Like come on, I haven't played in 2 weeks now. I have to go.
I'm spoiled. I play like almost every day.
You do. You are spoiled. So no, I know you completely know what you mean.
Yeah, I've played probably like 3 Commander games in the past 3 months.
Ouch.
Yeah, so I need to make some more time for sort of myself and stuff like that. But man, content creation is hard. Dana, you should know that. You got so much stuff going on.
It does consume the time for sure. It's one thing I've definitely noticed in my case. Like my son he's 11 now. 6 years ago, 7 years ago, when I first started playing Commander, I couldn't have created content. I couldn't have been on podcasts. It was way more difficult. At this point in time, he's 11. He's like got his own thing going on. So it's much easier as a parent to do it. But man, it is time consuming. And if you have a family and kids, it gets tricky to find room to do this stuff.
Yeah. So it ends up being that my own Commander games suffer a little bit. But do you know what? The whole reason why I started this channel was to scratch the itch of Commander and to like brew and get my mind in it. So honestly, sometimes I'm like, I want to play some, but a lot of the times just building a deck, just brewing and interacting with people and hanging out with you guys just really makes me feel like super good about where I am in Magic and the kind of stuff that I'm putting out there. So yeah.
Are you going to be at many Magic Fests? Have you figured out any scheduling for yourself where people can find you to play some games at any point this year?
So I'll 100% be at Los Angeles because it's down the street. So yes, I'll be at Los Angeles. I will 100% be at Vegas, even though I'm annoyed it's moved to August instead of the middle of the summer. So I'll 100% be at those two. Traditionally, I've gone to the Pacific Northwest ones. So like Portland and Seattle, because my wife's from Seattle. We have friends up there. We have family up there in Portland and Seattle. So we tend to go up there a lot. And then maybe I'll go to like Phoenix. That sounds good too. I don't know. Maybe that's a part of it too. I don't know. When is Phoenix? I don't know. I don't know these things.
October 25th.
So
End of October.
It's a horrible time of year for me.
Weather.
Why on earth?
Yeah, we're going to leave perfect Wisconsin weather to go down
Phoenix.
there and just be miserable.
All right, it's a long ways away where you can deal with that when the time comes.
We did Vegas in June.
Right, yeah. So do you have any questions for us or anything before we kind of segue our way out here?
Yeah. So what do you think is your signature deck? Because you guys were grilling me about Braids, which seems to be like my signature deck. What do you think is your signature deck? Because I know you mentioned a lot of individual ones, but let's find out what is like your identity tied into a commander.
Man, well, I'll throw it to Max first here. What's yours? What's your Max?
I'm torn.
You're just an evil Azorius mage. Just admit it.
Okay, I am. It's all Brago. Brago is who I identify with. I mean, I have the Azorius tattoo on my wrist for a reason. That's who I identify with the most.
I would say when I think of you, Max, I think of that deck.
Scumbag. Right?
No, not even that. It's not. There's really oppressive Brago decks. Your deck isn't an oppressive Brago deck. It's difficult and challenging, and I feel like I can't let you play. I can't let you be. I can't ignore you. But I also feel like if I play a excellent game of Magic and I'm prepared and I have a deck that's intelligently built, I never feel like it's an unfair matchup. I just feel like I can't slack off either, which is, I think, a really good power level that I like to play against.
Well, thank you. I mean, DJ's played against it. I mean, I played against him and Stibbs with it at Vegas.
Okay.
That didn't end
Well, hang on, Max. So that sounded like a compliment, but the adjectives that Dana used was difficult, challenging, and can't ignore you. Those are those were the themes that he said. So,
That's very true.
I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, they all sound like good words to me.
Okay, good.
How about you, Chris?
Have to be anything with Rakdos in it. The Rakdos color combination, by far.
I think of your Mogus deck when I think of you, which you said you don't play very much. But
No, because everyone hates me. Every time it comes out, they're like, oh, he's playing Mogus. Guess what? It's going to be a 3-on-1.
Well, you put people on a clock immediately. Like, okay, well, I'm taking damage. Everything in that deck makes people take damage every turn. And like, oh, this is just going to be 9-turn game, full stop, no matter what happens. People aren't going to be able to outlive that damage.
Well, that was the whole point to me building that deck to begin with, was we would come down and sit down and play, and you have like 4 or 5 hours to play. Well, we'd only get like 2 or 3 games in, and I'm like, we're going to make these games faster.
Yeah, that's the deck I would identify with you as well. I am not entirely sure. My Glissa deck is my favorite, but I feel like right now my Reki History Kamigawa deck is a deck that probably is my signature deck.
And you know people hate that deck too? I pulled that out, like 3 weeks ago, and all they did was as soon as Reki hit the field, die. And I'm like, okay, cool. Well, I'll play this. I'll play Reki again. Oh, kill Reki. I don't care about the rest of the things you're playing. I'm like, just stop. Give me like 1 turn with Reki on the field.
It does all the things. It's an obscure commander, which I like. I like picking something that I don't see other people play. I get to play a bunch of cards that people don't play in their decks. I've got, Hope and Girapur in there, and I have Avaya Pashiri because they're 1-drop legends that draw me cards. Like, I have a bunch of janky bad legends in that deck that aren't janky and bad in that deck because they all cantrip and draw me a card, and they all feed off one another with things like Dragon Throne of Tarkir or Hero's Podium. So there's a lot of synergy in that deck too. So it does all the things I want. It meshes really well together. It lets me play kind of obscure cards, which is kind of a way to show off. And it lets me win games with stuff that people aren't used to seeing win games with, which also, I don't know if it's an ego booster, but I like doing that. That's something that appeals to me as a player, is winning with
Doesn't he always win the game the same way with that deck, though, too? Yeah,
Dragon Throne of Tarkir or an Overroaming Stampede for a bajillion.
Right after he plays, what is that?
Genesis Wave or Kamal's Druidaic Vow.
Every time.
Actually, last week I did a Kamal's Druidic Vow for 22, but I put enough lands into play, and I put, I think, 2 mana doublers out as well. I was able to then do a Genesis Wave after that for like another 22.
All but one, please.
And that was in a lone turn. But that's you're doing really dumb stuff in that deck with a commander that no one ever expects that you're going to do really dumb stuff with. So that, for me, really appeals to me.
Yeah, it's a fun deck to play against. It's a fun deck to play, and I'm glad you said that was like your signature.
Was that what you thought of?
Yes.
Okay.
Actually, when I think of you, I think back to when we first started playing, and it was Sigarda. Like, every week Sigarda would come out, and you're just like, how am I going to deal with her?
Oh, and that was, DJ mentioned earlier, or was it you, Max, not playing a deck for a while? That was a deck I didn't play for 6 or 8 months just because the Banchantress decks came out. And I'm like, it's going to play too similar. I might retire it. And I didn't. I just set it aside and didn't play it for 6 months. And now the last 3 weeks I've broke it out and played it a couple times. And it's fun again because I didn't play it forever. So I've enjoyed playing it again, having taken time off. So DJ, you kind of said, would you still say, is Braids your deck? That's a deck that you think of when you think of your deck?
Do you know what? At this point in time, I think it has to be, right? Like that's like the thing that it has to be. But actually, yeah, I think it is sort of my go-to deck, and it does the stuff that I want it to do. Sometimes I'm like, I want my multicolor stuff, but you know what? It's just got to be Braids, man.
I did really enjoy your Hazezan Tamar deck though, because
so much fun. I love that deck.
And it's much more effective than you kind of would think for a commander from Legends when there's so many bad legends in that set. And even when I read it the first time, I'm like, okay, well, you don't get the tokens for a full turn, and they can't attack till the following turn, so you need a haste enabler. Like, when I first read the card, you don't really realize it's a really, really effective commander, too.
The only thing that makes me super sad is that it's a reserveless card, and it's like, it's past $100 for sure for this commander that shouldn't be that expensive because it's not that powerful. It's just a supply and demand thing. So that's the thing that makes me really sad. But ultimately, it's a token deck, but it's like a resilient, janky, out of nowhere smash token deck. Oh man, I love it, and it scratches that itch of the obscure commander too. So I'm a fan of it.
For sure, I absolutely feel that. Well, thank you very much for coming on our show. We really appreciate having you on. It's been a lot of fun.
I've had a ton of fun talking with you guys. It's awesome.
We'd actually talked about at Vegas last year, you had actually brought some equipment because we had talked about recording something last summer, and we wound up just playing games all night instead.
We did do that, yes. Yeah. I brought like a microphones and recording equipment and stuff like that. It's like, do you guys want to record or do you want to just shuffle up and play another? Oh, let's play some more Magic. Okay.
I feel shows like where our priorities was a redundant question. Let's just shuffle up and play.
Yeah, no, I mean, as fun as this has been, I have no regrets about just playing Magic all night. That was great. So,
agreed.
If people want to find you online, where would they find you on Twitter and YouTube?
You can find me at Jumbo Commander on Twitter. Go ahead and tweet at me and tell me all of the horrible things that I do and how I messed up. And Commander Central. Okay. But more importantly, go check out my deck techs, my videos on YouTube. Search Jumbo Commander. You can find all sorts of deck techs. I'm putting them out every week. Like Max mentioned earlier, I also do buying guides. So when I put stuff in my cart and I start buying stuff, then I usually make a video about it telling you guys like, hey, this is the stuff I'm buying right now. You guys might want to do that too if you want to save some money on Commander staples. And then every so often, I might make some clickbait awesome video about rules interactions that you will watch part of and then ignore the rest of it. So you should stay tuned to those as well.
We absolutely will. Well, thanks a lot for having me on. And until next week, I am Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.
Wait, I'm DJ.